let's bring Coach Karl into the conversation. You ready, Shawnee?
I'm ready.
All right. Here is the former NBA Coach of the Year, Jordan-Karl. Coach, man, it is so good to see you. We've been pumping this up, so we know we've got a lot of people on Facebook ready to watch, and that includes your former assistant coach, Don Bassett. It's good to see you. Thank you for hanging out with us, Chris and Sean. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain about life. I got a beautiful day in Denver. Played golf yesterday, and hopefully we're going to break out of this social, whatever we're in, and I get to go out and enjoy the beautiful sunshine of Denver and hopefully socialize a little bit more.
Yeah, we were just talking about, what it might take here in New York State to get back to kind of that normal life you were talking about. Coach Bassett did text me to let me know that he was watching. So say hello to Coach Bassett, but also, George, if you could, give me a classic Donnie Bassett story.
The one thing that comes to mind when I think of Don Bassett is I thought he was a very wise offensive coach. And most coaches I've run into over the years, I think were more defensive minded and think the game starts at the defensive end of the court. But I think Don Bassett really enjoys the offensive end of the court. And I've used one thing he always did is when I got to Albany, I always would put defensive goals on the chalkboard before a game or maybe before a season. And Don Bassett was the one who said I should put offensive rewards or goals. And I've carried that throughout my career, that I don't unbalance the points of emphasis. I try to keep 2 or 3 offensive priorities and 2 or 3 defensive priorities, and I got a lot of that from Don Bassett.
And George, I can tell you firsthand when I go to a UAlbany basketball practice now, Coach Bassett, who's basically advising head coach Will Brown, is always talking about, we need to push the ball. Get the tempo going, Will. Let's get up and down the floor. So even at 84, man, he hasn't changed.
Well, I always enjoy his passion. Even when I saw him a couple of years ago, and I talked with him a couple of weeks ago on a Zoom call with some guys from the Patroons, and he still has that passion that basketball coaches have. And, I have it. I like being around people that have it. And I'm sure that he still has, he's a hell of a competitor. He's had a hell of a career. He's done it in a lot of different ways, from assistant coach to head coach. He's touched a lot of bases that I think are I'm really proud to call him a friend.
Coach, we obviously want to ask you about the Last Dance documentary on ESPN. Your name came up a couple of times in the last episode that aired. I was just curious, did they ask you to be a part of the documentary? Did they try to interview you for that?
That was a total shock. I mean, I knew something was up when SportsCenter had called me and wanted me to do an interview about that episode. And I said, well, I haven't seen the episode yet. Should I see it? And they didn't want me to see it. So they wanted me to be shocked by it. But Scott Van Pelt and I had a good discussion about it. And everything that was said about Gary and about my decisions, and I don't think I stood up Michael Jordan in a restaurant. We were in the same restaurant. He was with a party of 5 or 6, 7 people. I was with a party of 6, 7, 8 people, and my choice was not to go over there and say hello. His choice was not to come see me and say hello. Everybody's blaming it on me. Why can't I blame it on him?
Right.
He stood me up. And, he says it was in Chicago. I think it was in Seattle. And I think in Seattle, we were down 0-2 or 0-3. And I didn't really want to talk to Michael Jordan at that time, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Michael, since then, I've been with him half a dozen, maybe more times playing golf. Never brought it up. He's a great Tar Heel. He takes care of the Carolina community in a high level of being an ambassador. And I think, and I've always thought, he's the best player to ever play the game, and he's the best competitor to ever play the game.
Coach, I want to share something with you, and I showed it to our viewers earlier. I'm originally from New Jersey, huge Sonics fan in the 90s. So anytime you guys played on TNT, I had to beg my parents to let me stay up late to watch some of it. I'd only make it to halftime. They would write the score down on like a Post-it note and put it by my bed so that when I woke up in the morning, I'd know whether or not you guys won or lost. This is me at 10 years old rocking my Sean Kemp jersey.
Wow.
So even in Northern Jersey, man, you guys had a ton of fans because of how good you were. So, for instance, as a fan and a kid growing up in the 90s, I remember exactly where I was when the Nuggets knocked you guys out in the first round. I remember exactly where I was when the 96 finals ended. And so my question is, as a coach, are you like fans in that way, that you remember some of the painful losses more than you do the wins?
I think so. What I've done, in this pandemic situation we're in, I've gone back and looked at a lot of my playoff games, and I've had a lot of fun with them. I looked at Golden State and Utah when we were down 0-2 and came back and won a game 5 in Utah. I've looked at my second year in Seattle when we had a 5-game series in the first round against Utah and won that in the 5th game. Had a 7-game series against Houston and won that in overtime in the 7th game. And then we had a 7th game playoff for the conference finals against Phoenix. So, a couple of my coaches get on a Zoom call and we look at these games and we laugh. And, I'll be honest with you, there's some nights I'm going, I did a hell of a bad job, man. I was awful. I mean, I'm looking at my team play and I'm going, you're not doing anything. I was criticizing me. But, I also had a lot of games where I had a lot of fun and we had a lot of great wins.
You talked about Jordan's competitiveness, and a lot of people will say, hey, that's what made him a great teammate. I'm sure some of his teammates would say it made him a bad teammate at times. But I'm curious, who's the guy in your career who was the best teammate guy who you coached, the guy who made everybody around him better and made the locker room better?
Well, I've talked about this a lot, about the series against Chicago. My belief, everybody says, what would you change? The one thing I would change, and you can't do it because it's health, is have a healthy Nate McMillan. You look at the series, Nate doesn't play the first 3 games. We play okay, but we're getting our butts kicked pretty good. And game 3 was more because of travel than anything else. Nate plays game 4. He doesn't play that good, but we play good. Game 5, same thing. Nate was okay, but we really play good. And so the whole thing comes down to is Gary Payton in many ways was the heart of our team. But the soul of our team might have been Nate McMillan. And I just wish we could have had, we were just a more confident, more guided, and more focused team when Nate McMillan was on the court with us.
When you think back on that series, what went into the preparation for the Bulls and Jordan specifically? This is a team coming off this incredible record. What was the approach of how do we even try to contain this guy?
Well, to be honest with you, Sean, if you go back and look at all 6 games, you'll see a lot of ugly basketball because you have 2 really good defensive teams. And no matter what you want to say, Chicago shot 41% for the series. We shot 44% for the series. They probably won the statistical game because of Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
Rodman gave him so many extra possessions with his offensive rebounding. And, one game Crew Coach gave him a game. One game Pippen gave him a game. Rodman was consistent. Rodman, doesn't score very much, but he gave him rebounds every night and gave him a great defensive effort every night. So, if I look back on what I know now from the series, is I would have probably worked on how to score more points, maybe be more aggressive defensively, trying to create turnovers. But the triangle was a very good court balance offense, so it's hard to double team, it's hard to pressure. But with Michael in general, we gave him a lot of double teams. We gave him we didn't want him to have isolations. Pick and rolls, we would double them. Post ups, we would double them. So we gave him a lot of different looks. But to be honest with you, as I said before, it was a defensive series. And the last game was just the game 6. No one could score. For 2.5 quarters, no one scored. They make 5 or 6 threes in the third and fourth quarter. And that's the reason they kind of blow us out a little bit.
This is such an old basketball fan question to ask, but I got to ask it because how do you feel like now we see such an emphasis on offense and pace of play in the game? How do you think like the really good offensive teams that we see now, like the Golden State is kind of a classic example, would have fared in that era of such intense defense? And we do see the defense pick up certainly in the playoffs, but how do you think a team like that would have done in an era like that?
What rules were we going to play by?
Back then.
Are we going to play by that back then? If we played back then, Golden State would be slowed down. They would still score a lot of points, but they would not score as many points as they score now. The game was much more possession oriented, and almost all coaches were in the possession orientation. Now all coaches are into playing fast, finding flow, playing with pace. Why? Because as Don Bassett would say, it's easier to score 3-on-3 than 5-on-5. It's easier to score when you have numbers. It's easier to score when you create your offense with your defense. And so I think everybody's kind of come to that conclusion. The analytics have now pushed us to say that taking crazy threes is not a bad offense. But I still think, I think Golden State and Chicago would be a great matchup. And I probably lean to, if we play by the 90 rules, Chicago win. If we play by Golden State rules, today rules, I think they'd have a chance of beating Chicago. But I still like Chicago's defense.
Sean and I, Coach, are both in our 30s, but we both also pine for the days of 1990s NBA. And so what I love about this documentary most is that I think it's showing to some younger people even that, like, oh, you were allowed to put a hand on a guy beyond the 3-point line. Like hand checking was actually allowed, and you could physically foul a guy near the rim so he didn't get a shot off, and it wasn't an automatic flagrant foul or he wasn't being thrown out. So the physicality and seeing some of that now, I greatly enjoy. We have a comment from someone here on Facebook, Coach, and I know just for people who are watching now, Coach has a podcast as well. You can find it on iTunes, but it's also at truthandbasketball.com. So if you're wondering what Coach Karl's up to these days, that is one thing for sure. But he's wondering, John, on Facebook, is Coach, if you are advising an NBA team in any way currently.
I help out, all my guys. I've been to Charlotte. Mitch Kupchak's general manager. I'm good friends. They're one of my best assistants is an assistant in Charlotte. I hang out in Toronto in Detroit with Dwayne Casey, and I've talked with Nate McMillan a little bit. So those 3 teams, and I go down to LA with my son, who's the coach of the the South Bay Lakers. And so I'm hanging out in the Laker facility, even though I don't talk to the Laker coaches, but I talk to the G League coaches.
I know Coach Bassett had said to me, one of your great joys is the time you have now to watch Kobe's team and kind of be around that a little bit. I should point out here too, for as much as we're talking about Coach Bassett, you had Sam Perkins on your Seattle team. He has Capital Region ties to New York. He played his junior and senior high school years here, the Big Smooth. And when I think about Perkins at 6'9" or 6'10", however tall he was, Coach, he was a guy who maybe was the first to step out at that size and shoot the three. And I don't know that you guys shot a ton of threes, but I remember there being a bunch of good three-point shooters on your team, especially after the trade for a guy like Hersey Hawkins.
Well, I think, we evolved into be a three-point shooting team, but the game back then just didn't have as much freedom to shoot the threes they shoot now. I mean, teams now are shooting 40, 50 threes in a game. That would never happen back then. I think the most probably if the team shot 20, 25, that was considered a lot of three-pointers back then. But Perk was, when I got Perk in Seattle, he hadn't shot many threes. And I just watched him after games. After practices, he would be having shooting contests with our best shooters and winning. And I said, Sam, you got to start shooting these in the game, man. And he turned out to be really unbelievable there because Sam, I think, was one of the first players to make 9 in one game. I think he made 9 in a row in one game, in fact. Yeah. And, Sam, and I love Sam. Sam's a Tar Heel. He's a great teammate. And our team was made in Seattle when we traded Benoit Benjamin for Sam Perkins.
A guy of regional interest around here who Chris and I and a lot of Capital Region basketball fans probably still keep an eye on is Carmelo Anthony for his time with the Knicks. He's a guy you know very well. It felt like he wasn't going to get a job here for a while, and now he's had this resurgence in Portland. Does any of that surprise you, what we've seen out of Carmelo, what was this season before the season was put on hold?
I've always trusted Carmelo's skills. What I need, I think Melo has to figure out is where he fits. And being a stud and being an all-star and being one of the top 10, maybe top 20 players in basketball for most of his career, he's not that anymore. And he's got to have a transition into accepting a bench role or at least a lesser responsibility. And if he does that, I think he could play for another 3 or 4 years. Because, he has all aspects of the game. He can score, he can shoot, he can rebound. He's a good passer. And if he would focus on being more of a passer, it'd be even better. If he would play the game a little more unselfishly, I think he'd be really, really better. And I think this is going to surprise you, but if he wants to play defense, he can. It's just the want there is, I think, what I've had problems with over the years.
Yeah.
Coach, you played in the NBA, obviously, for the Spurs. You played at Carolina. You coached in the NBA before your time here in Albany. But what was it about your time with the Patroons that you feel made you a better coach in any way?
I think the combination of my time in Albany and my time in Real Madrid, for a better phrase, I don't like this phrase, but I think I grew up a little bit. I think my ego, my immaturity, my stubbornness, I had a lot of traits that young guys have, egotistical guys have. But by being in Albany, it humbled me. It made me focus on how I wanted. I focused on how I could make my career better and what I needed to do about me. And then Real Madrid, really living in a foreign country, going through some unbelievable stuff, like one of your best players, if not your best player, getting killed in an automobile accident and getting fired. And European management is just goofy. If you lose 2 in a row at Real Madrid, you can get fired. They pulled the trigger on changing coaches very, very quickly. And, just learning the passion of the Spanish players. And I love my time in Spain. It was a great experience. But more than anything, I think I grew up a little bit.
Sean, you want a last one here for the coach?
I was just going to ask, Coach, what do you miss most about coaching?
That's easy. I miss my basketball family. When you practice every day and you're playing 82 games a year, you actually spend more time with your basketball family than you do with your own family. And I just miss the camaraderie of every day, trying to figure out a game plan, trying to figure out a 2-game losing streak, celebrating a 5-game winning streak, game planning against the great players and great coaches in the NBA, and then competing. I miss all that.
Well, you wouldn't say it because you're too classy of a guy, but you got a raw deal in Denver, obviously. You're NBA Coach of the Year before they let you go in 2013. 57 wins. Raw deal in Seattle, as far as I'm concerned. 59.5 wins is what you averaged over a 6-year span, your final 6 years in Seattle. And Coach, as somebody, I do a lot of work in the Capital Region with the American Cancer Society. You've kicked cancer's ass 3 times. It is so good to see you healthy, doing well, and hopefully enjoying life with your family.
Well, I'm still going to be in the gym, hanging out somewhere, just like Bassett. I'll just be along for the ride, and just as long as someone asks my opinion, I'll probably enjoy it.
And they should.
Thank you so much for the time, man. We really appreciate it. Stay well, and hopefully we'll see the NBA back in Seattle before too long, and hopefully we'll just see the NBA back before too long.
Well, Chris, you should look on a website called Simply Seattle. They have all the Sonic gear. It's really a cool site.
That's my dream. I love it. Good, because you know what, Coach? I think I've outgrown this jersey a little bit.
I hope so.
They have some neat stuff. They have some good stuff. SimplySeattle.com.
Beautiful. And check out truthandbasketball.com while you're at it. Listen to Coach Karl's podcast right there. Thank you, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay safe, guys. Stay strong, baby.